You and other scholars have shown that Mark's Gospel in particular appears to record the witness of Peter, who was an eyewitness. So Mark wasn't an eyewitness, Peter was. How reliable is that kind of second-hand reporting of an eyewitness testimony?
I think it's probable, historically true, very probable. We have several witnesses for this tradition. The first is Papias, bishop in Hierapolis in Asia Minor, who is writing that Mark was the follower and the interpreter of Peter. This is quite probable. Then the fishermen of the Sea Gennesaret didn't speak exactly Greek, probably not better than I speak English, and I am also glad to have an interpreter. And this Mark is very probably the Mark we know from the Acts of the Apostles, where he was sometimes also a follower of Paul, and he having the first letter of Peter, we have him. Peter knows him, my son, you see, and this shows the relation. And we have also two traditions in Justin, where he calls the Gospel of Mark the Gospel of Peter, belonging to Peter. And of course, we have the great witness of Irenaeus at the end of the 2nd century. And Mark mentions Peter. He is the smallest gospel in relation to other gospels more often than in the much larger gospels like Luke, Matthew, and John. And we have a special form is we have an inclusion. Peter is the first disciple to be mentioned by Mark just after the beginning of the teaching of Jesus, after his baptism by John. And the name of Peter is mentioned last. It's the last name of a disciple in the Gospel in Mark 16, where the angel at the tomb telling to the women, go and tell the disciples and Peter that Jesus is resurrected and you will see him in Galilee.
So and this is a literary technique, is it?
It is a literary technique, this inclusion, and he shows that by this, the second Peter is absolutely necessary because it belonged to the disciples, that he that he mentions his name first and last, shows that he is related to him.
But if Mark, not Peter, is the author of that gospel, how reliable historically is this second-hand witness?
Well, this is a disputed question. I think it is a relative reliability. What's the English expression?
Reliability.
Reliability, that's a tongue breaker for me. And it's a relative reliability. And of course, because Mark, in the Gospels, we have no protocols. You see, no televisions and no tapes, because we have only memory and the witness about. And of course, a witness, vivid witness, is sometimes changing traditions. Our memory, especially if you are expounding a text, if somebody is expounding what Jesus has said and done, his memory is changing the things. We have therefore a historical and theological witness about Jesus, and not only historical records.
Jesus spoke in Aramaic, and the Gospels are all written in Greek. Does this suggest a great gap between Jesus and the Gospel writers?
Surely it's a relative gap, but it must not be a great one, because most of the disciples spoke all a bit Greek. Two disciples have a Greek name, Andreas and Philippus, and in Galilee, Greek is spoken even by more simple people, peasants and fishermen, a bit like you in Jerusalem, Hebrew or Arab taxi drivers, of course, speak a bit English, but no literary English. This is a difference. And so it was a visit the disciples who have, I think, the discussion between Jesus and Pilate in John or in the Synoptics. Pilate is asking Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answers the same thing. "You are telling it." This means, "Yes, I am." And I don't believe that Pilate spoke Aramaic. Surely he spoke Greek, which was a lingua franca in the Eastern Roman world, like English is now in the world. And I think that Jesus answered with yes, and he understood so much Greek that to answer his questions. Maybe this is a poor hypothesis. Nazareth, where he grew up, is only 6 kilometers far from Sepphoris, which was destroyed by Varus before Christ, and was rebuilt by Herod Antipas. And Jesus as a mason, that's right, or a
carpenter.
Carpenter. Jesus as a carpenter or a builder. You see, a carpenter was a house builder, was not only working with wood, and he also may have worked at Sepphoris together with his father. Here you can write Jesus fiction a bit if you want. This is a possibility. And he was so intelligent, sure, that he knew also Greek necessary for daily life. May I tell
sure.
We have about 250 ossuary inscriptions in Jerusalem.
These are the inscriptions on bone boxes in tombs.
Bone boxes in tombs. And 40% of these inscriptions are Greek. And only 60% are Hebraic or mostly Aramaic.
Which suggests?
Well, that there's a great part of the people in Jerusalem spoke Greek. We have in Act 6 Hellenists separating from the Hebraic speaker or Aramaic speaking Christians, and there was some strife between it. It maybe have personal and economical and theological reasons. Of course, there were always some tensions between, even in the first communities. That's very human. But nevertheless, I think that the two communities belong together. And the most important people in Jerusalem for the Christian mission were the people who are bilingual, Greco-Palestinians who spoke both languages, and Mark was such a person.